A wild stallion sees his rancher rescue after 8 years. His reaction is jaw-dropping. The dusty valley lies quiet until a thundering of hooves breaks the silence. A lone rancher stares in disbelief. The same wild stallion he once set free scarred, untamed, now stands at his fence, lowering his head as if he remembers. But townsfolk call it a miracle. But soldiers arrive with rope and iron, claiming the horse for the government, and marking the rancher's valley for a seizure. Just as hope flickers, a widow at the town's edge whispers the truth. The stallion isn't just a horse. He carries the weight of promises, broken treaties, and survival itself. Now, with greedy men closing in and a child's life hanging. By a thread, the bond between a man and a wild beast may be the only thing standing against ruin. But can courage and faith hold back the railroad's might? And when freedom itself is on the line, will the stallion run wild once more, or stand and fight? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. The first rays of sunlight crept over the eastern ridge as Liam McGraw shouldered his tools and headed out to check the fences. Wind had been fierce lately, and the wooden posts needed constant mending. His boots crunched against the parched earth, each step stirring small clouds of dust that had become all too familiar during these years of drought. He paused to wipe his brow with a faded band, his weathered hands telling the story of decades working this land. The morning air still held a bite of chill, but he knew it wouldn't last. The valley stretched before him, brown and thirsty, waiting for rain that rarely came these days. 8 years, he muttered to himself, running his hand along a fence post that needed securing. 8 years since Sarah had passed, leaving him alone with nothing but acres of dry land and memories that haunted the quiet house. The wind whispered through the grass, reminding him of her laugh. Liam tightened the wire on the post, his movements automatic after so many years of the same task. The ranch had been their dream together, but now it felt more like a duty than a joy. Still, he kept at it, day after day, because that's what Sarah would have wanted. A glint of movement caught his eye from the ridge. Liam straightened, squinting against the morning sun. A cloud of dust rose in the distance, and his heart quickened as a shape emerged from the haze. His breath caught in his throat. There, silhouetted against the rising sun, stood a sight he never thought you'd see again. A massive stallion, coat gleaming like burnished copper, mane flowing wild in the wind. But it wasn't just any horse. Liam would know that proud stance anywhere. The white blazed down its face, the distinctive scar along its flank. "Can't be," he whispered, tools forgotten in his slack grip. It was the same stallion he'd found in that government trap 8 years ago, half wild with fear and anger. He'd spent hours that day working to free it, ignoring the protests of the local authorities. Sarah had backed him up, bringing water and helping calm the frightened animal. "Wild things deserve to stay wild," she'd said, her eyes bright with purpose. The stallion pawed at the ground atop the ridge, tossing its magnificent head. Then, like a spirit from his memories, it began to run down toward his pastures. Liam stood rooted to the spot, afraid even to breathe. The horse's muscles rippled with each powerful stride, its hooves barely seeming to touch the earth as it drew closer. Liam could see the years had left their mark, new scars decorated. Its hide and its face showed the wisdom of age, but its eyes still held that same untamed fire he remembered. The stallion slowed as it approached his corral, steam rising from its flanks in the cool morning air. "Well, I'll be," Liam breathed, hardly daring to move. The horse stopped near the fence, close enough that Liam could see its sides heaving from the run. It pawed at the dirt, nostrils flaring as it took in his scent. There was recognition in those dark eyes. Liam would stake his life on it. "Remember me, old friend?" he asked softly, keeping his voice low and gentle. The stallion's ears pricked forward at the sound, and it took a step closer to the fence. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. This couldn't be coincidence, could it? After all. "These years?" The morning wore on. and word spread through town like wildfire. By early afternoon, trucks and cars kicked up dust along his drive as neighbors arrived to see for themselves. They gathered at his fence line, speaking in hushed tones as they watched the magnificent horse that seemed content to graze within sight of Liam's corral. "It's the same one, ain't it?" Old Joe Thompson asked, leaning on his cane. "The one you freed from that trap years back?" "Has to be a sign," Martha Wilson whispered to her husband. "Things like this don't just happen by chance." Liam heard their whispers, their talk of omens and miracles. He didn't know what to make of it himself. The stallion stayed through the afternoon, sometimes approaching the fence, sometimes keeping its distance, but never straying far as the sun began to set. The neighbors gradually departed, leaving Liam alone with his unexpected visitor. He went about his evening chores, feeling the horse's gaze follow him as he worked. The familiar ache of loneliness settled over him as he headed inside to fix his solitary supper. Sitting at his kitchen table, Fort pushing around beans on his plate, Liam found himself remembering that day 8 years ago. Sarah had been so proud of him for freeing the stallion. "Sometimes saving wild things saves something in ourselves," she told him that night. He hadn't understood what she meant then. Maybe he still D-I-D-N single quotes T-dot. The moon rose full and bright, casting silver light across his land. Liam stood at his window, coffee cup cooling in his hands. Out by the fence line, the stallion's coat gleamed like ghost fire in the moonlight. It stood there watching, as if standing guard over both the ranch and his memories. For the first time in years, Liam felt something stir in his heart, something that felt suspiciously like hope. He couldn't say why, but somehow the return of this magnificent creature had cracked open a door he'd thought forever sealed. Maybe Sarah had been right about wild things. Maybe there were still miracles in this dry, lonely world. The stallion continued its vigil in the moonlight, its presence a reminder that even in the midst of drought and solitude, life had a way of circling back around, bringing unexpected gifts when they were needed most. The morning sun had barely cleared mountains when Liam hitched his old Mare to the wagon. He needed supplies from town, and truth be told, he wanted to hear what folks were saying about his unexpected visitor. The stallion watched from near the fence line as Liam climbed onto the wagon seat, its dark eyes following his every move. "I'll be back soon enough," Liam said softly, though he wasn't sure why he felt the need to tell the wild horse his plans. The stallion tossed its head as if in acknowledgement, making Liam shake his head at his own foolishness. Still, he couldn't deny the comfort of having another living soul to talk to, even if it was just a horse. The 10-mile journey into town gave him plenty of time to think. The wagon wheels creaked a steady rhythm over the dusty road as Liam's mind wandered back to yesterday's miracle. He still couldn't make sense of it. That proud stallion returning after all these years, choosing to stay near his ranch of all places. Main Street was already bustling when he pulled up to Henderson's. Mercantile, Mrs. Henderson herself, stood in the doorway, her round face breaking into a warm smile at the sight of him. Liam McGraw, just the man everyone's been talking about. She hurried down the steps to meet him. "Is it true? That wild stallion you saved years ago really came back?" "News travels fast," Liam said, climbing down from the wagon. "Oh, it's all anyone can talk about." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Reverend Thompson says it must be a sign from the Almighty himself. Says God works in mysterious ways, especially for those who show kindness to his creatures." Before Liam could respond, other townsfolk began gathering around. Old Joe Miller clapped him on the shoulder, and Sarah Jenkins, who ran the post office, pressed a fresh apple pie into his hands for luck. Their excited chatter filled the morning air. "It's like something out of a storybook," someone said. "Must be God's blessing on you, Liam," another added. Liam felt his face grow warm at all the attention. He'd never been one for crowds or fuss, preferring the quiet of his ranch and the company of his thoughts. But there was something touching about their genuine excitement, their need to see something miraculous in the stallion's return. The friendly atmosphere shattered at the sound of boots striking wooden planks. The crowd parted as Harrison Harriman strode toward them, his expensive suit setting him apart from the town's worn denim and cotton. 2 soldiers flanked him, their uniforms crisp despite the dusty air. "Well, well," Harriman said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "If it isn't the man of the hour, I hear you've acquired quite an impressive horse, McGraw." Liam straightened, instantly wary. He dealt with Harriman before. The railroad agent had been sniffing around local properties for months, trying to secure right-of-ways for the expanding rail line. "That stallion's wild as the wind," Liam said firmly. "Don't belong to nobody." Harriman's smile widened, turning predatory. "That's where you're wrong." He pulled the document from his coat with flourish. "According to federal law, all unbranded horses in these territories are considered U.S. government property. The Army's in need of fresh mounts for the cavalry." "That's nonsense," Liam protested, his hands clenching into fists. "That horse is free. Has been since the day I cut him loose from your trap 8 years ago." "Ah, yes, your illegal interference with government property." Harriman's voice dripped with satisfaction. "I have that incident noted right here as well." The gathered townsfolk shifted uncomfortably, their earlier excitement curdling into tension. Harriman seemed to feed off their discomfort, producing another document with theatrical precision. "But that's not all I have here, McGraw. These are survey papers, officially marking your valley for railroad expansion. The government's invoking eminent domain. Progress waits for no man, after all." Liam felt as though he'd been struck. "You can't just take my land," he managed, his voice rough. "That ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. "The law says otherwise." Harriman gestured to the soldiers. "These fine men will be collecting that stallion this afternoon. As for your land," he smiled that cold smile again. "Well, I suggest you start packing." "This ain't right," Liam said, looking around at his neighbors. But where moments ago there had been friendly faces, now he saw only averted eyes and nervous shuffling. These were good people, but they had their own farms and ranches to protect. Nobody wanted to catch Harriman's attention. "The law is the law, McGraw," Harriman said. "You're living in the past. The frontier days are over. It's time for civilization to move forward." Liam watched helplessly as Harriman and the soldiers strode away, leaving him standing alone in a crowd of people who suddenly seemed like strangers. The apple pie in his hands felt heavy as lead. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Liam loaded his supplies mechanically, barely hearing Mrs. Henderson's whispered apologies or the sympathetic murmurs of others. The wagon seemed to crawl. On the return journey, every mile bringing him closer to what he knew was coming. They arrived just after noon. Harriman, the soldiers, and a handful of ranch hands they'd hired for the job. Liam stood on his porch, watching as they approached the stallion with ropes and poles. The proud animal sensed their intent immediately, its ears laying flat against its head as it backed away from the fence. "Don't do this," Liam called out. But his words fell on deaf ears. The soldiers worked with brutal efficiency. One threw a rope that caught around the stallion's neck while others moved to hem it in. The magnificent horse fought like a demon, rearing and striking out with its hooves, but it was 6 against 1. More ropes flew, and slowly, inexorably, they began dragging it toward town. Liam's neighbors had gathered to watch, their wagons and trucks lined up along the road. But when he looked to them for support, he found only downcast eyes and turned backs. They'd all seen what happened to folks who crossed Harriman and the railroad. Nobody was willing to risk becoming the next target. The stallion's desperate struggles grew weaker as it was dragged away, its proud spirit seeming to dim with each step. Liam's hands gripped the porch railing so hard his knuckles turned white, but he forced himself to watch until the dust clouds surrounding the group disappeared. Around the bend, the valley grew quiet as the sun sank toward the horizon. The neighbors drifted away one by one, leaving Liam alone with his humiliation and rage. He leaned against his barn, feeling the rough wood dig into his back, and tried to make sense of how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Darkness crept across the land, bringing with it the mournful cries of coyotes in the distance. Liam stood in his yard, staring at the empty spot where the stallion had kept its vigil. The magnitude of what he faced pressed down on him like a physical weight. His land, his heritage, his very way of life, all of it threatened by men who saw the world only in terms of profit and progress. For the first time, he truly understood how alone he was. This wasn't a fight he could win by himself, not against the railroad, not against the government, not against the ruthless march of time itself. The realization settled in his chest like a stone, heavy with truth and despair. The coyotes called again, their voices carrying across the empty valley. Liam stood in the growing darkness, torn between rage at the injustice and despair at his own helplessness. The night wind whispered through the grass, carrying away the last echoes of the day's events, leaving him with nothing but questions and no. Clear path forward. Dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and golds as Liam guided his horse along the dusty road toward town. His muscles ached from a restless night, his mind churning with worries about the stallion and his land. The morning air carried a hint of sage and desert flowers, but even their familiar scent couldn't lift his spirits. The government corral stood at the edge of town, its rough-hewn posts casting long shadows in the early light. Liam's heart clenched at the sight of the wild stallion pacing within, its proud head lowered, its spirit already dimming in captivity. He pulled his horse to a stop, not quite ready to ride closer and face that sight head-on. Movement near the town well caught his eye. A woman in a faded blue dress was drawing water, helped by 2 children. Even from this distance, Liam recognized Karen Tenorio and her kids. He'd seen them in town before, but hadn't spoken much beyond polite greetings. Now, watching young Tomas help his mother with the heavy bucket while little Rosa gathered wildflowers nearby. Something in the peaceful scene drew him forward. Buenos dias, Senator McGraw, Karen called. As he approached, her voice warmed despite the early hour. Her dark eyes studied his face with quiet concern. You look troubled this morning? Liam dismounted, nodding toward the corral. That stallion shouldn't be in there. Ain't right. What they're doing. Ah, yes. Karen's expression softened with recognition. I remember that horse from years ago. My husband, she paused, touching the silver cross at her neck. Before he died, we saw it running free in the high meadows. Like a spirit of the land itself, he said. So beautiful, so strong. 9-year-old Rosa drifted closer, clutching her handful of yellow flowers. Mama says the horse is magic, she whispered, eyes wide with wonder. Not magic, Majida. Karen smiled gently at her daughter. But special, yes. A reminder that some things are meant to be free. 12-year-old Tomas set down the water bucket, his young face serious. The soldiers shouldn't take it. Or your land either, Senator McGraw. Everyone's talking about it. Tomas, Karen chided softly. But Liam saw the concern in her eyes. No, he's right to speak plain. Liam leaned against the well's stone wall, suddenly weary. The railroad's been pushing folks around, taking what they want. Using the army too? Do their dirty work? Karen nodded, her face grave. They have always bent rules against those they see as weak. My people know this well. The Apache, the Mexican, the widows and orphans. We are easy to push aside in the name of progress. She spoke without bitterness, but with the quiet certainty of hard experience. How do you bear it? Liam asked softly. With faith, she answered, touching her cross again, and by remembering that God does not send signs without purpose. She glanced meaningfully at the corralled stallion. That horse returned to your land for a reason, Senator McGraw. Perhaps Providence has plans neither of us can see yet. Something stirred in Liam's chest at her words. Not quite hope, but maybe its distant cousin. He watched as Rosa offered her mother a particularly bright flower, the simple gesture full of love and trust. Would you? He cleared his throat, surprised by his own impulse. Would you and the children care to share supper at my place this evening? Nothing fancy, just beef stew, but there's plenty. Karen's eyes widened slightly. At the invitation, after a moment's consideration, she smiled. We would be honored. The day passed slowly, with Liam keeping one eye on the corral as he did his tasks around town. The stallion's presence weighed on him, but now it was tangled with thoughts of Curran's words about providence and purpose. As evening approached, he hurried home to prepare for his guests. The cabin hadn't hosted company since his wife's passing, and he found himself studying it with new eyes, sweeping the floor, straightening chairs, setting out his best tin plates. The familiar motions of cooking brought back memories of happier times, when laughter and warmth had filled these walls. The sun was setting when he heard hoofbeats approaching. Curran rode up on her old mare, Rosa seated in front of her, and Tomas on his own pony. The children's eyes were bright with excitement as they dismounted. "Something smells mighty fine," Tomas declared, helping his sister down. "Mind your manners," Curran reminded him, but she was smiling. Inside, the cabin seemed to come alive with their presence. Rosa set the table while Tomas peppered Liam with questions about ranching. Curran moved naturally in his kitchen, warming. Tortillas on the cook stove while Liam tended the stew. The lamplight cast a gentle glow as they gathered around the table. Curran said grace in both Spanish and English, her voice soft but strong. The simple meal felt like a feast, flavored with easy conversation and children's laughter. After supper, Rosa grew sleepy, curling up in a chair near the fire. Tomas spread a blanket on the floor nearby, claiming he wasn't tired even as his eyes grew heavy. Curran and Liam sat at the table, talking quietly about their lives, their losses, their hopes for their children's future. As the fire burned low, Liam watched the children sleeping peacefully, their faces soft in the fading light. Something long frozen. And his heart began to thaw, though he held back, cautious of hoping too much. Still, he couldn't deny the rightness of having a family in his home again, of sharing this quiet evening with people who understood both struggle and faith. Curran caught his expression and smiled knowingly, but said nothing. Some truths, Liam realized, didn't need words to be understood. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the embers glow and listening to the children's steady breathing, while outside, the desert night wrapped around the cabin like a protective blanket. Morning sunlight bathed the town square in golden light, as townspeople gathered, their boots stirring dust from the hard-packed earth. The murmur of voices filled the air, a mixture of excitement and unease. Liam McGraw stood at the edge of the crowd, his weathered hat pulled low against the glare. He noticed Curran and her children arriving, taking a spot near the general store's wooden steps. Railroad agent Harriman cut an imposing figure on the hastily constructed platform, his city suit pristine despite the frontier dust. 2 army officers flanked him, their brass buttons gleaming. The sight made Liam's jaw tighten. "Good people of Silver Creek," Harriman's voice rang out, commanding attention. "Today marks the dawn of progress for your community." He unfurled a large map, holding it up for all to see. "The Western Pacific Railroad has chosen your valley for its new line, bringing prosperity and opportunity to all." A few cheers rose. From the crowd, Harriman smiled, clearly pleased. "We'll need workers for construction, station masters, telegraph operators." "Good. Steady jobs for those ready to embrace the future." "And what about those whose land you're taking?" Liam called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Heads turned his way, but he held his ground. "What about the promises made to folks who settled here?" Harriman's smile thinned. "The valley has been legally condemned for public use, Mr. McGraw. The railroad will offer fair compensation." "Fair?" Liam stepped forward. "There's nothing fair about forcing people from their homes." "Now, see here," Ben Tucker, a rancher from the South Valley, spoke up. "Some of us welcome this change. Can't stop progress. McGraw, railroad's coming whether you like it or not." "Progress at what cost?" A new voice joined the debate. Reverend Alden emerged from the crowd, his Bible clutched in one hand. The circuit preacher's usual gentle demeanor had hardened into something more resolute. "The good book speaks clearly about justice and the treatment of one's neighbors." He opened his Bible, pages rustling in the morning breeze. "Woe to those who join house to house, who add field to field until there is no more room." He read, his voice carrying across the square. Isaiah warned against the powerful taking from the weak, using their might to push others aside. Harriman's face darkened. This is a matter of law and commerce, Reverend, not scripture. All matters touch on God's law, Alden countered firmly, including how we treat our neighbors in times of trial. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Liam saw uncertainty in many faces, folks who'd known him for years, who'd shared meals and helped with roundups, now weighing their loyalty against Harriman's promises. Karen stepped forward then, her children close beside her. Her voice was clear and steady. My people know about broken promises and stolen land. The Apache were promised this valley would remain open range. The Mexican settlers were guaranteed their rights by treaty. Yet here we stand again, watching the powerful push aside the weak. Rosa pressed against her mother's skirt, while Tomas stood straight-backed, his young face serious. Karen continued, Mr. McGraw speaks for more than just his own ranch. He speaks for all who believe promises should mean something. Harriman's lip curled slightly. Mrs. Tenorio, this is hardly. My husband died defending this land. Karen cut him off, her dignity unmistakable. He believed in justice, in keeping faith with neighbors. What do you believe in, Mr. Harriman, besides profit? A heavy silence. All over the square, Liam saw people exchanging glances, saw the moment of decision in their faces. Some nodded in agreement with Corinne's words. Others looked away, already imagining the railroad's promised prosperity. The survey teams start tomorrow, Harriman announced flatly. Those who wish to apply for railroad work can see my clerk at the hotel. He stepped down from the platform, the army officers following in his wake. The crowd began to disperse, breaking into small groups that buzzed with discussion. Some headed toward the hotel, while others approached Liam with quiet words of support. The division was clear, a community splitting along lines of conscience and convenience. Reverend Alden clasped Liam's shoulder. You're not alone in this. Fight, brother. The Lord sees justice done in his time. Much obliged, Reverend, Liam replied quietly. Reckon we'll need all the help we can get. The day passed in a blur of worried conversations and preparations. As evening approached, Liam helped Karen load her wagon for the ride home. The children climbed in, both unusually quiet after the morning's tensions. Rosa had gathered wildflowers during the day, and their bright colors stood out against the wagon's worn boards. They set out as the sun began to sink, painting the valley in soft purple shadows. The clip-clop of hooves and creak of wagon wheels matched the rhythm of Liam's thoughts. He rode alongside on his horse, watching the familiar landscape with new eyes. Every ridge and waterhole, now precious in its threatened state. Tomas and Rosa dozed against their mother, the day's excitement having worn them out. Karen kept the reins steady, her profile serene in the fading light. Thank you, Liam said softly, not wanting to wake the children. For speaking up today, meant a lot, hearing you stand with me. Karen glanced his way, a gentle smile touching her lips. It was only truth. Some battles must be fought, even when victory seems unlikely. Reckon so. Liam looked ahead to where his ranch building stood, dark against the twilight sky. Never thought I'd be fighting the railroad, though. Man alone doesn't stand much chance. Against such as that. You are not alone, Karen reminded him, her voice warm with certainty. God sends us help when we need it most. Sometimes in ways we don't expect. The wagon rolled on through the gathering dusk. Crickets began their evening song, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage. Despite the peace of the moment, Liam felt the weight of what was coming. Tomorrow would bring survey teams, more arguments, more pressure to give in. But Karen was right. He wasn't alone anymore. Looking at her steady presence beside him, at her sleeping children who already felt like family, he found strength he hadn't known he possessed. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Dawn broke crisp and clear over Silver Creek, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Liam McGraw adjusted his hat against the morning light as he and young Thomas Tenorio made their way toward the government corral on the edge of town. The boy practically bounced with each step, barely containing his excitement. Remember now? Liam said quietly. Steady and careful, just like we talked about. Tomas nodded earnestly. Yes, sir. I won't let you down. The government corral came into view, its rough-hewn posts stark against the morning sky. 2 soldiers stood guard, rifles slung across their backs, looking bored with their assignment. Inside the enclosure, the wild stallion paced restlessly, his black coat gleaming despite the dust of captivity. Liam paused at the corner of the mercantile, drawing Tomas into the shadow of the building. He removed his hat, closed his eyes, and whispered a prayer that surprised even himself. Lord, if you're listening, we could use a bit of help here. For justice's sake. Amen. Tomas watched him with solemn eyes, then squeezed his arm in silent support. They approached the corral casually, Liam moving with the easy stride of an experienced horseman. The guards straightened slightly, but didn't seem overly concerned. Liam tipped his hat to them, then leaned against the corral fence, studying the stallion with practiced eyes. Morning, fellas, he said amiably. Mind if we take a look? Boy, here's never seen such a fine horse up close. The younger guard shrugged. Stay outside the rails. Liam nodded, then began a slow walk around the corrals. Perimeter. The stallion tracked his movement, ears pricked forward in recognition. 8 years had passed since Liam had freed him from that government trap, but some memories, it seemed, ran deep as they reached the far side of the corral. Tomas launched into action with the natural enthusiasm of youth. Say, mister, he called. To the guards, is it true you're from back east? My mama says. Soldiers come from all over. The guards exchanged glances. Then the younger one smiled. That's right, son. I'm from Pennsylvania myself. Pennsylvania? Tomas exclaimed, eyes wide with genuine curiosity. Do they have horses like this one back there? As Tomas drew the guards into conversation about Eastern horses and army life, Liam worked quietly. His weathered hands found the key rope knot that secured the corral gate. With subtle movements, he began working it loose, not enough to open immediately, but just enough that a strong horse might break free. The stallion watched him intently, as if understanding. Liam kept his movements slow and deliberate, murmuring softly in the way he'd learned over decades of handling horses. Easy now, old friend. Patience. Tomas kept the guards thoroughly distracted with questions about army uniforms and cavalry charges. The boy had a natural gift for conversation, his innocent enthusiasm drawing even the more taciturn older guard into the discussion. When the knot was sufficiently loosened, Liam stepped back and gave a low whistle, not loud enough to draw. Attention. But the stallion's ears swiveled toward the sound. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, Liam saw the same wild spirit that had drawn him to free the horse years ago. The stallion pawed the ground once, twice, then launched himself at the gate. The weakened knot gave way with a snap, and the gate burst open. The guards spun around, shouting in surprise, but the horse was already moving. Dust flew as the stallion bolted past them, his powerful strides carrying him toward the open valley. The guards scrambled for their rifles, but the horse was too quick. Liam held his breath, watching as the magnificent creature thundered away. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of disappearing into the hills, the stallion slowed, circled wide, and turned back. To everyone's amazement, he trotted toward Liam's wagon, which stood waiting at the edge of town. Would you look at that? One of the guards muttered, lowering his rifle in bewilderment. The stallion fell into step behind the wagon, as natural as if he'd been doing it for years. Liam felt a lump form in his throat at this display of trust. Tomas beamed with barely contained joy. Word spread quickly through town as they made their way back to the valley. Folks came out of shops and houses to watch the procession. The wagon, Liam and Tomas on their horses, and the freed stallion following of his own accord. Whispers rippled through the growing crowd. The horse chose him. Must be a sign. Never seen anything like it. By late afternoon, they reached Karen's small cabin on the valley's edge. The stallion had stayed with them the entire way, sometimes dropping back to graze, but always returning to follow the wagon Karen stood in her doorway, smiling at their approach. Rosa sat on the porch steps, her small frame wrapped in a shawl despite the warm day. She waved excitedly as they drew near, then covered her mouth as a light cough shook her. "Mama," Tomas called out, practically leaping from his horse. "You should have seen it." The stallion, he just knew what to do, like he remembered Mr. McGraw from before. Karen's eyes met Liam's, understanding passing between them. "God works in mysterious ways," she said. Softly, Liam noticed a worn spot in Karen's roof, where several shingles had worked loose, without being asked. He fetched his tools from the wagon and set about fixing it while Karen began preparing their evening meal. The familiar smell of cooking beans soon wafted from the cabin's open window. From his perch on the roof, Liam could see the stallion grazing contentedly in the nearby meadow, free, but choosing to stay. The sight filled him with a quiet hope he hadn't felt in years. Inside the cabin, Karen worked at her cook stove while Rosa set the table with careful movements. The girl's cough worried Liam. It seemed to be getting more frequent. He made a mental note to bring some of the honey and herbs his wife had always used for winter coughs. As the sun began to set, they gathered around Karen's simple table. Steam rose from bowls of beans, and fresh-baked bread filled the air with its homey scent. Karen bowed her head, and the children followed suit. "Heavenly Father," she prayed, her voice gentle but firm, "we thank you for this food, for this day's blessings, and for bringing good friends to our table." Amen, the children echoed, while Liam found himself unexpectedly moved by the simple grace. They shared the meal together, passing bread and exchanging smiles. Tomas excitedly retold the morning's events, his hands gesturing dramatically as he described the stallion's escape. Rosa listened with shining eyes, forgetting to cough in her enthusiasm for her brother's story. The warmth of the moment struck Liam deeply. How long had it been since he'd shared a meal like this, surrounded by the gentle chaos of family? His own ranch, despite its size and prosperity, had felt empty for so long. Just echo-filled rooms and solitary suppers. Here, in this small cabin with its patched roof and simple fare, he found something his heart had been missing. The children's laughter, Karen's quiet strength, the shared prayers and breaking of bread, it all spoke to something deep within him, something that had nearly withered away in his years of solitude. Outside, the stallion's occasional nickering drifted through the window, a reminder of the day's miracle. But sitting here, watching Rosa carefully fold her napkin and Tomas help his mother clear the plates, Liam realized he was witnessing an even greater miracle. The rebirth of hope in his own heart. The morning sun cast long shadows across Liam. McGraw's valley as he stepped onto his porch, coffee cup warming his weathered hands. Through the early mist, he spotted the stallion grazing peacefully near his corral, head lowered to the dew-touched grass. The sight lifted his spirits. After yesterday's daring escape, the magnificent creature had chosen to stay, as if knowing he belonged here. The horse raised his head, acknowledging Liam with a gentle nickering sound. Steam rose from the animal's nostrils in the cool morning air. Liam couldn't help but smile. "Morning to you too, friend." The crunch of wagon wheels on the dirt road drew his attention. Karen's wagon approached, the morning light catching on its worn wooden sides. Thomas sat proudly at the reins while Rosa huddled close to her mother, wrapped in a thick blanket despite the promise of a warm day ahead. "Brought you some fresh tortillas," Karen called out as they drew near. "Least I could do after you fixed our roof yesterday." "Much obliged," Liam replied, setting his coffee cup on the porch rail. He helped Rosa down from the wagon, noting how the girl's small hand felt warm in his calloused palm. She coughed once, softly, but her eyes brightened at the sight of the stallion. Inside, Karen spread the still warm tortillas on Liam's table while Tomas poured cups of coffee for the adults. And milk for himself and Rosa, the kitchen filled with the comfortable sounds of breakfast and quiet conversation. "The roof should hold now," Liam said, breaking a tortilla in half. Added some extra support to those loose rafters, too. Karen's eyes softened with gratitude. "You're too kind, Liam. We've managed on our own since Miguel passed, but she paused, watching Rosa pick at her food. Sometimes it's good to accept help from friends. Rosa coughed again, but it seemed mild enough. She smiled when Liam passed her the honey jar for her milk. We need to talk about what comes next, Karen said, her voice turning serious. Harriman and his railroad men won't give up easily. Liam nodded, pushing his empty plate aside. Ben, thinking on that. County Judge Matthews, he's known for being fair-minded. If we can get him to review the condemnation order, and I remember a clerk at the land office, Corinne added. Mr. Jenkins. He helped several Mexican families keep their lands last year when the mining company tried to force them out. They spent the next hour planning, with Tomas listening intently while Rosa dozed in a chair by the window. The morning sun climbed higher as they drafted letters and discussed their strategy. I'll ride to see Reverend Alban, Liam decided, standing. To buckle on his gun belt? His word carries weight with folks around here. He found the Reverend in his small church, dusting hymnal books. The morning light streamed through plain glass windows, casting rainbow patterns on the wooden pews. Liam, Reverend Alden, greeted him warmly. I wondered when you'd come. They sat in the front pew, their voices echoing in the empty church as Liam explained the situation. The Reverend listened carefully, his weathered Bible resting in his lap. The railroad men speak of progress, Alden said finally, but they forget that God's justice must guide all progress. Otherwise, it's just greed wearing a finer coat. He stood, placing a firm hand on Liam's shoulder. I'll speak against this from the pulpit. Some won't like it, but truth must be told. By evening, word had spread through the valley. Neighbors began arriving at Liam's barn, some openly supportive, others glancing nervously over their shoulders. Old Jake Henderson brought a wagon load of firewood. The widow Thompson promised hay from her south field. Even young Billy Carson, whose father supported the railroad, slipped in to offer help moving cattle if needed. Tom Wilson, who owned the neighboring ranch, hung back in the shadows of the barn door. Can't openly stand with you, Liam, he whispered. Got my family to think about. But if trouble comes... He left the sentence unfinished. But his meaning was clear. Hope stirred in Liam's chest as he watched them leave. Their wagon wheels cutting fresh tracks in his yard. The stallion watched from the pasture, his coat gleaming in the setting sun. Maybe, just maybe, they could save this valley. But fate had other plans for that night. Liam had just settled by his fireplace. A cup of coffee cooling on the side table, when urgent pounding shook his front door. He opened it to find Tomas, tears streaming down his face. Mr. McGraw, please come quick. Rosa's real sick. Liam grabbed his coat and medical kit, the one his wife had always kept stocked with herbs and bandages. He ran to the barn, saddled his horse with practiced speed, and lifted Tomas up behind him. They galloped through the darkness toward Corinne's cabin. The boy's arms wrapped tightly around Liam's waist as they rode, his voice shaking as he explained. She just started coughing real bad during supper. Then she got so hot, like she was burning up inside. The cabin windows glowed with lamplight. As they approached, Corinne met them at the door, her face drawn with worry. Inside, Rosa lay on her small bed, her face flushed with fever. Her breathing came in sharp, painful gasps, punctuated by deep, racking coughs. It came on so fast, Karen whispered, pressing a cool cloth to her daughter's forehead. 1 minute. She was fine then. Her voice broke as Rosa coughed again, the sound tearing at everyone's hearts. Liam knelt beside the bed, gently taking Rosa's small hand in his. Her skin burned against his palm. The girl's eyes fluttered open, glazed with fever, but she managed a weak smile. Mr. McGraw, she whispered between coughs. Did the horse stay? He sure did, little one, Liam answered, his throat tight with emotion. He's watching over the valley for us. Corinne's tears fell silently as she stroked her daughter's dark hair. Tomas stood in the corner, his young face a mask of fear for his sister. The cabin walls seemed to close in around them, filled with the sound of Rosa's labored breathing. Liam met Corinne's eyes across the sickbed. In that moment, he knew their fight had grown beyond land and justice. This was about saving a child's life, about protecting the family that had somehow become precious to him. The railroad, the valley, even the Stallion, all of it paled against the fierce need to see Rosa well again. As the night deepened around the cabin, Rosa's fever continued to climb. Karen prayed softly in Spanish while Liam wrung out cool cloth and coaxed the girl to sip water. Thomas finally fell asleep in a chair, exhausted from worry. The stakes had changed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, all that mattered was the small figure fighting for breath in the lamplight, and the love that bound together this makeshift family in their hour of need. The morning sun had barely touched the mountain peaks when Liam saddled his horse. His jaw clenched as he thought of Rosa's fevered face from the night before. Karen had insisted he get some rest, promising to send Tomas if Rosa worsened. But sleep had evaded him, his mind filled with memories of his wife's final days and the helplessness he'd felt then. The Stallion watched from the pasture as Liam mounted up. Its dark eyes seemed to hold understanding of his urgency. "Keep watch," Liam murmured, touching the brim of his hat. The horse tossed its head as if in response. Liam pushed his mount hard along the valley road, dust rising behind them. The town was just stirring to life when he reached Dr. Spaulding's office, hitching his horse to the rail with trembling hands. But something felt wrong. The windows were dark, the door locked tight. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house next door saw him standing there. She hurried over, wringing her apron in her hands. "Oh, Mr. McGraw, you haven't heard?" "Heard what?" Liam's voice was rough with fear. "Dr. Spaulding left yesterday afternoon. Took the stage to Santa Fe." She lowered her voice. "That railroad. Man, Harriman, he arranged it. Offered the doctors some kind of position at a fancy new hospital they're building." The truth hit Liam like a physical blow. Harriman had removed the only doctor for 20 miles, leaving him vulnerable. Leaving Rosa vulnerable, his hands curled into fists at his sides. "Lord Almighty," he whispered, the words half prayer, half curse. Inside the telegraph office, young Billy Jenkins looked up from his key machine. The clicking of the telegraph filled the small room as Liam composed his message to Fort Garland. "Urgent stop, child. Gravely ill stop. No doctor in Valley stop. Request immediate medical assistance stop. Liam McGraw Rancher, Eagle Valley, STOP please." Fingers tapped out the message, the sound sharp and desperate in a quiet room. "Might be days before we get a reply, Mr. McGraw," he said softly. "Army's been busy with Indian troubles up north." Liam nodded grimly. "Send word to my ranch if anything comes through, day or night." The hours crawled by as Liam searched the town for anyone with medical knowledge. The midwife was away delivering a baby in the next valley. The farrier who sometimes helped with injuries had ridden east to shoe horses at a distant ranch. Even the herb woman who lived at the edge of town had no remedies strong enough for Rosa's fever. Sunset painted the mountains blood red. Liam finally turned his tired horse toward Corinne's cabin. His saddlebags held what little he'd found. Willow. Bark for fever, honey for cough, clean bandages. It felt painfully inadequate. Lamplight glowed in Curran's windows as he approached. The sight caught in his throat. How many times had he passed this cabin in recent years, never knowing the family within would come to mean so much? Curran opened the door before he could knock. The shadows under her eyes spoke of another sleepless night, but she managed a wan smile. "Come in," she said softly. "Rosa's been asking for you." The cabin's main room felt close and warm, heavy with the scent of medicinal teas. Rosa lay on her small bed, her dark hair damp with sweat against the pillow. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, interrupted by weak coughs. Karen had propped her up with extra pillows to ease her struggle for air. "Mr. McGraw?" Rosa's voice was barely a whisper, her cracked lips forming the words with effort. Liam knelt beside her bed, taking her small hand in his. The heat of fever burned against his palm. "I'm here, little one. Did you see the horse today?" Even now, the Stallion occupied her thoughts. "Sure did. He's keeping watch over the valley for us, just like I promised." Liam's voice caught as Rosa's eyes drifted closed. Her hand going limp in his Karen sank into a chair nearby, murmuring prayers in Spanish and Apache. The mixed languages flowed together like a song, ancient words of supplication rising to the rafters. Thomas stood in the corner, his young face lined with worry beyond his years. "Mr. McGraw?" The boy's voice trembled. "Is God going to let Rosa die?" The question struck Liam like a knife to the heart. He rose and crossed to Thomas, gripping the boy's thin shoulders. "Listen to me, son. I won't give up on your sister. Not while there's breath in my body. You hear me?" Thomas nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. Liam pulled him close, feeling the boy's shoulders shake with silent sobs. A loud whinny pierced the night outside. The stallion's voice rang clear and strong, echoing off the valley walls like a trumpet call. Karen crossed too, the window drawing back the curtain. "He's been doing that all day," she whispered. As if he knows, Liam stepped out onto the small porch, the night air cool against his face. The stallion stood at the edge of Karen's property, its coat gleaming silver in the moonlight. As Liam watched, it threw back its head and called again, the sound carrying all of the anguish in their hearts. His boots crunched on gravel as he walked to his barn. Inside, the familiar smells of hay and leather surrounded him. He sank to his knees in the darkness, the weight of 8 years of bitterness finally breaking him open. "Lord," he whispered, his voice rough with unshed tears, "I've been angry since Sarah died. Blamed you for taking her, for leaving me alone." He drew a shuddering breath. "But now there's a little girl in there fighting for her life, a family that needs help. I can't lose him too." The silence of the barn wrapped around him like a... Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, a lonely sound that seemed to echo his pain. "Please," he continued, his hands clasped tight. "I don't deserve your help, but Rosa does. Karen and Thomas do. Show me what to do. Give me strength too. Help them." The quiet that followed felt different somehow, as if the very air had changed. Liam remained kneeling, letting his breathing slow, letting the peace of the moment wash over him. In that stillness, something shifted inside him, like ice breaking up on a spring river. The bitterness that had frozen his heart for so long began to crack and move taut as he rose from his knees. Resolve stirred in his chest. They would find a way to save Rosa. God hadn't brought this family into his life just to take them away. Whatever it took, whatever price he had to pay, he would see them through this trial. The stallion's whinny rang out once more as Liam stepped from the barn. This time, it sounded less like a cry of despair and more like a call to action. Like a reminder that even in the darkest night, hope remained. Dawn painted the eastern sky in pale gold when Liam stepped out of his barn, his mind set on a desperate gamble. The wild stallion stood at the corral fence, steam rising from its coat in the crisp morning air. Those intelligent eyes watched Liam approach, and the horse's ears pricked forward with interest. "Reckon you and I got work to do," Liam murmured, holding out his palm. The stallion stretched its neck, nostrils flaring as it caught his scent. The scarred hide showed silver in the early light, testament to years of survival in the wild. Liam knew only one hope for Rosa now, Brother Samuel, the missionary healer who lived near the reservation agency. It meant 2 days of hard riding, through territory where a man alone could easily disappear. But the fever burning through Rosa's small body left no choice. He worked quickly, gathering supplies in his saddlebags. Hard bread wrapped in cloth, strips of dried beef, a wool blanket, rolled tight, his canteen freshly filled. Each item chosen with the knowledge that every ounce of weight would tax his mount on the brutal trail ahead. The sun had barely cleared the mountains when Karen appeared at his fence, her shawl pulled tight against the morning chill. "Liam?" She called softly. "What are you planning?" He secured the last strap on his saddle before turning to face her. "There's a healer, Brother Samuel. Lives out near the agency. 2 days' ride, maybe less if we push hard. 2 days?" Karen's face paled. "The trails are dangerous that far out. Bandits, mountain lions, flash floods in the canyons this time of year." "Got no choice," Liam said, his voice gentle but firm. "Rosa needs help. and this is the only way I know to get it. But the stallion, he's wild, untamed. You can't know if he'll bear you that far. As if in answer, the horse nudged Liam's shoulder with its soft muzzle. The touch sent warmth through his worn jacket, like a promise. He'll carry me, Liam said with quiet certainty. Don't ask me how I know, but he will. Karen stepped closer, her dark eyes searching his face. You would do this? Risk so much for us? Ain't about risk anymore, Liam replied. It's about what's right. She reached for his hand then, her fingers warm against his calloused palm. Bring him back safe, she whispered, and bring hope with you. The words settled in Liam's chest like a prayer. He squeezed her hand once before letting go, then turned to the stallion. The horse stood rock steady as Liam gathered the reins and swung into the saddle. 8 years in the wild had taught this creature's strength and endurance. Now that same wild spirit would carry them through whatever lay ahead. Keep watch over them, Liam called to his nearest neighbor, old Pete Wilson, who had come to help Karen while he was gone. The old man raised his hand in solemn promise. Then they were moving, the stallion's powerful strides eating up the ground as they headed east. The morning air rushed past Liam's face, carrying the scent of sage and cedar. Behind them, the sun climbed higher, casting their shadow long across the valley floor. The first hours passed in a rhythm of hoofbeats and breathing. The stallion moved with fluid grace, choosing its path through rocky terrain with uncanny skill. By midday, they had covered more ground than Liam would have thought possible. His regular ranch horses would have needed rest 3 times over, but the stallion showed no sign of tiring. They paused briefly at a stream, letting the horse drink while Liam ate a strip of jerky. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones, and the stallion's coat gleamed with sweat in the noonday sun. Liam studied the scarred hide, wondering at the stories written there. How many battles had this creature fought? How many storms weathered alone? Reckon we've both seen our share of hard times, he murmured, running a hand along the horse's neck. The stallion turned its head, regarding him with one dark eye. In that moment, Liam felt understanding pass between them, 2 beings who had known loss now joined in common purpose. The afternoon brought steeper country. They climbed through passes where the trail clung to cliff edges, the drop-offs falling away into shadow. The stallion never faltered, placing each hoof with deliberate care. Its breathing came deep and steady, drawing on reserves of strength. That seemed endless. As the sun began to sink, they found shelter beneath a sprawling cedar tree. Its branches spread wide, offering protection from the cooling wind. Liam unsaddled the stallion, watching steam rise from its back in the gathering. Dusk. He spread his blanket on the needle-strewn ground and settled against the trunk. Too tired to even build a fire, the horse grazed nearby, tearing at patches of tough grass. Its coat looked silver in the starlight that filtered through the cedars. Canopy. Liam broke off a piece of hard bread, chewing slowly as he studied the constellations wheeling overhead. The night pressed close around them, filled with small sounds, an owl's questioning call, the rustle of wind through cedar needles, the quiet movement of the stallion's hooves. Liam felt the day's tension slowly ease from his muscles, replaced by a deep weariness. Yet as exhausted as he was, sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept returning to Rosa's flushed face, to Karen's worried eyes. The weight of their need pressed on his heart, driving him to prayer once more. This time the words came easier than the barn. Maybe it was the vastness of the star-filled sky, or maybe something had truly shifted inside him. He prayed for Rosa's healing, for Karen's strength, for Brother Samuel's wisdom. But he prayed for more too, for the courage to stand against injustice, to protect not just his own land but the rights of all who called the valley home. The stallion moved closer as he prayed, its warm bulk blocking the wind. Liam reached out, running his hand over the scars that marked its neck. The horse allowed the touch, standing quiet in the darkness. You and me, Liam murmured. We got people counting on us now. Can't let them down. The stallion's only response was a soft snort, but Liam felt the truth of it. settle in his bones. Whatever bond had formed between them, whatever miracle, had brought this wild creature back into his life, it went deeper than mere chance. There was purpose here, and promise. He dozed finally, wrapped in his blanket beneath the cedar's protective branches. The stallion remained close, its presence a comfort in the wilderness night. Above them, the stars continued their ancient dance. Across the sky, bearing witness to a partnership forged in desperate need and growing trust. Dawn broke cold and gray over the eastern mountains, painting the landscape in muted shades. Liam stirred beneath his cedar shelter, every muscle protesting from yesterday's long ride. The stallion stood nearby, head raised and alert despite their grueling journey. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising rough weather ahead. "Reckon we'd best get moving," Liam murmured, rolling his stiff shoulders as he pushed to his feet. The horse watched him with intelligent eyes as he gathered their simple camp and readied the saddle. There was no time for breakfast beyond a piece of hard bread. The storm clouds were building fast. They set out just as the first light touched the canyon walls. The trail ahead wound through narrow passes, barely wide enough for horse and rider. Steep cliffs rose on either side, their faces worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The stallion moved carefully, each step deliberate on the uncertain ground. By mid-morning, the temperature had dropped sharply. Wind whipped through the canyons, carrying the sharp scent of coming rain. Liam pulled his coat tighter, watching the sky darken overhead. The stallion's ears flicked back and forth, sensing the changing weather. The storm hit just past noon. With sudden fury, rain fell in stinging sheets, while lightning split the sky in jagged bursts. Thunder crashed between the canyon walls, the sound amplified into deafening roars. The stallion danced nervously, its wild instincts urging flight from the storm's fury. "Easy now," Liam soothed, remembering how Sarah, his late wife, had always calmed frightened horses. Her touch had been gentle, her voice soft and steady, even in the worst weather. "Easy, boy. We've come too far to turn back." He stroked the stallion's wet neck, speaking low and calm between thunder crashes. "That's it. You're all right." Just like Sarah always said, steady heart makes steady feet. The horse's trembling gradually eased under Liam's quiet words. Though the storm raged on, they continued their careful progress through the canyons. Rain ran in rivulets down the cliff faces, and small waterfalls appeared where none had been before. The trail turned slick and treacherous, but the stallion's sure instincts kept them moving safely forward. Hours passed in a blur of rain and mist. Liam's clothes were soaked through, but he barely noticed the discomfort. His thoughts stayed fixed on Rosa's fever, on Karen's worried face, on the desperate need to bring help before it was too late. The stallion seemed to share his determination, maintaining a steady pace, despite the terrible conditions. Evening light was fading when they finally emerged from the canyons into more open country. Through the curtain of rain, Liam spotted the weathered buildings of the reservation agency. Smoke rose from several chimneys, promising warmth and shelter after their long journey. Brother Samuel's small cabin stood apart from the main buildings, marked by a wooden cross above the door. Light glowed in its single window, and as Liam dismounted stiffly, the door opened to reveal the missionary's aged figure. "Lord have mercy," Brother Samuel exclaimed, hurrying out despite the rain. "Liam McGraw, is that you? What brings you out in such weather?" "Need your help, brother," Liam said, his voice rough from hours of silence. "Got a sick child back in the valley. Little girl, Rosa Tenorio. High fever that won't break." The old missionary's face grew serious. "Tell me everything while we get your horse settled. Poor creature looks like he's carried you through hell itself." They led the stallion to a small lean-to beside the cabin. While Liam explained Rosa's condition, Brother Samuel examined the horse with knowing eyes. "This is that wild one you freed. Years back, isn't it? The one they call Spirit Horse?" "Same one," Liam nodded. "Came back just days ago? Don't know why, but he's the reason I made it here so quick." "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Brother Samuel said softly. He turned to gather his medical supplies, moving with purpose despite his age. "We'll need to ride through the night to reach her in time. My old Mara can't make such a journey, but perhaps the Stallion will carry us both," Liam said with certainty. "He's stronger than any horse I've known." Brother Samuel nodded, accepting this with simple faith. He packed his medicines and herbs in oilskin bags, protected from the rain. "The storm works in our favor in one way. The wet will keep his strength up better than dry heat. But the trails will be dangerous." "He'll see us through," Liam replied. "Got no doubt about that now." They mounted carefully, Brother Samuel settling behind the saddle with his precious medical supplies. The Stallion adjusted to the double weight without complaint, as if understanding the urgency of their mission. As they set out into the stormy night, the old missionary began to speak quietly of faith and perseverance. "God tests us not to break." "U.S.?" he said, his voice carrying clearly despite the wind and rain. "But to prove what we're capable of when we trust in him. Every trial we face shapes us for his purpose." Liam thought of his years of loneliness after Sarah's death, of his bitter questioning of God's plan. Now, with Karen and her children bringing life back to his days, with this magnificent horse carrying them on their desperate errand of mercy, he began to see patterns where before he'd seen only pain. The Stallion moved tirelessly through the darkness, his hooves finding purchase on trails turned treacherous by rain. Lightning still flickered occasionally, illuminating their path in brief, bright bursts. Brother Samuel continued speaking of faith and courage, his words bringing comfort as the long hours passed. Near midnight, the rain finally began to ease. Clouds parted to reveal stars scattered like diamonds across the vast sky. The Stallion's pace never faltered, eating up the miles with powerful strides. Liam felt the horse's strength flowing beneath them, somehow still fresh despite 2 days of hard travel. The night deepened, then slowly began to fade. As the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky, Liam recognized the familiar outline of his valley's ridges. Hope surged through his exhaustion. They were close now, so close to bringing help to Rosa. The Stallion seemed to sense it too, his stride lengthening as they descended toward home. Brother Samuel had fallen silent, conserving his strength for the work ahead. Liam's body ached from the punishing ride, but his spirit felt oddly light. Whatever happened next, he knew they had done all that was humanly possible, and perhaps, with God's grace, a bit more than that dot they rode on. As the sky slowly brightened, the Stallion's hooves striking a steady rhythm against the rain-washed earth. Dawn was breaking over the valley, bringing with it the promise of a new day and the hope of healing. Karen hadn't left Rosa's bedside through the endless night. Her daughter's small hand burned with fever in hers, each labored breath a prayer for deliverance. The cabin's single room felt too quiet, marked only by the tick of the mantel clock and Rosa's uneven breathing. Thomas moved restlessly between the window and door, his young face drawn with worry. Every few minutes he'd pause to listen, hoping to hear horses approaching through the rain. "Nothing yet, Mama," he'd whisper, then resume his vigil. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Karen dabbed Rosa's forehead with cool cloths, murmuring comfort in Spanish and Apache. Her daughter's skin felt like hot iron beneath her touch. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving muddy puddles that reflected the midday sun. Tomas suddenly stiffened by the window. "Mama, Ryder's coming." Karen's heart leaped as she heard the distinctive sound of hoofbeats approaching. Tomas threw open the door, letting in a flood of sunlight. Through tears of relief, she saw 2 mud-spattered figures dismounting from the great black stallion, Liam and an elderly man she recognized as Brother Samuel. The missionary wasted no time with greetings. He hurried inside, his weathered face grave as he set down his medicine bags. "How long has the fever lasted?" he asked, already moving to Rosa's bedside. 3 days now," Karen answered, reluctantly releasing her daughter's hand, so Brother Samuel could examine her. "It started with just a cough, but then "You've done well keeping her cool," Samuel said kindly, noting the damp cloths. He opened his bags, pulling out bundles of dried herbs and small glass bottles. "Liam told me her symptoms on the ride. I believe I know what we're dealing with." Curran watched anxiously as the old missionary worked. He crushed herbs between his fingers, brewing them in hot water while murmuring prayers in a low voice. The cabin filled with sharp medicinal scents. Liam stood quietly by the door, exhaustion evident in his stance, but his eyes never leaving the scene before him. Brother Samuel gently lifted Rosa's head, helping her sip the bitter tea. "This will help break the fever," he explained. "But we must be patient. The body heals in its own time, guided by God's hand." Hours passed in tense waiting. Karen held Rosa's hand again, feeling every slight change in her daughter's condition. Toma sat cross-legged in the corner, unusually still. Liam moved only to bring water or tend to the stallion outside. Brother Samuel maintained his quiet vigil, checking Rosa's pulse and breathing, occasionally brewing more herbal remedies. As afternoon light slanted through the window, Karen felt a change. Rosa's breathing had grown easier, more regular. When she touched her daughter's forehead, the burning heat had lessened. "Brother Samuel," she whispered, hardly daring to hope. "I think..." The missionary checked Rosa's temperature and smiled. "The fever's breaking. She's turning the corner." Karen's tears fell freely then. She gripped Liam's rough hand as he stood beside her, her heart too full for words. Rosa's eyes fluttered open briefly, clearer than they'd been in days before. She drifted into natural sleep. Word spread quickly through the valley. Neighbors who'd kept their distance before now came to the cabin, bringing food and offers of help. They marveled at the story, how Liam had ridden the wild stallion through the storm to fetch brother Samuel, how the horse had carried double weight back through the treacherous night. "It's God's own miracle," people whispered. "That stallion coming back just when he was needed most." As evening settled over the valley, peace filled the small cabin. Rosa slept soundly, her breathing strong and steady. Brother Samuel dozed in the rocking chair, his medicine bags neatly packed beside him. Tomas had finally succumbed to exhaustion. Curled up in his blankets near the hearth, Dot Karen worked quietly at the stove, preparing a simple meal of bread and broth. Her hands trembled slightly as she filled bowls, not from fear now, but from overwhelming gratitude. She brought a bowl to Liam, who sat by the window watching the stallion graze in the twilight. "I don't have words enough to thank you," she said softly, touching his shoulder. "What you did for Rosa." Liam shook his head. "It weren't just me. That horse, he knew what was needed. It carried us through worse weather than I've ever seen. Never faltered once." He paused, his voice rough with emotion. "Maybe your people are right about him being a spirit horse." They shared the meal in comfortable silence, the lamplight casting warm shadows on the cabin walls. Outside, the stallion moved calmly through the evening grass, his dark coat gleaming like silk. He seemed utterly at home, as if he'd never been wild at all. Watching him through the window, Liam felt something shift in his heart. The lonely ache that had haunted him since Sarah's death seemed to ease. Here in this cabin with Curran's quiet, strength beside him and the children sleeping peacefully, he sensed God's hand at work, not in grand gestures, but in the small miracles of healing and hope. The stallion had led him here, he realized, not just on the desperate ride to fetch Brother Samuel, but on a longer journey from grief to grace. Like the morning after the storm, his world felt washed clean, ready for new growth. Dawn painted the valley in soft gold, but the peace wouldn't last. Hoofbeats thundered through the town square, kicking up dust as Harriman rode in with 4 soldiers at his back. His face was twisted with fury, his usual polished appearance disheveled from hard riding. "McGraw!" Harriman's shout echoed off the mercantile's wooden walls. "Get out here, you thieving rascal." Townsfolk emerged from shops and homes, gathering cautiously around the edges of the square. Liam stood on the general store's porch, having just purchased medicine for Rosa. His jaw tightened as he watched Harriman dismount. "You're a fool if you think you can steal government property and get away with it," Harriman snarled, stalking toward him. That stallion belongs to the United States Army. Your little jailbreak is going to cost you dearly. The horse chose. Where to go, Liam said evenly. He's a free creature, not Army property. Free? Harriman barked a harsh laugh. Nothing's free out here anymore, McGraw. This is railroad country now. And you're not just a horse thief, you're inciting rebellion. Against progress itself. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably in their saddles, looking at familiar faces in the crowd. These were people they knew. Neighbors who'd fed them, fixed their gear, treated them like family. Sergeant, Harriman snapped. Arrest this man. Before the soldiers could move, boots scuffed on wooden planks. Reverend Alden stepped out of his church, Bible tucked under his arm. His quiet voice carried across the square. Freedom belongs to God alone, Mr. Harriman. Not to railroads, not to corporations, not even to governments. Harriman's face reddened. Keep your sermons in church, Reverend. This is a legal matter, is it? Alden moved to stand beside Liam. Or is it a matter of right and wrong? Of mercy versus greed? More townspeople drew closer, forming a loose circle. Karen appeared at the edge of the crowd, her dark eyes fierce. She stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. That stallion carried Liam through the night storm to save my daughter's life, she declared. While your bought-off doctor was away in Santa Fe, my Rosa lay dying. Liam risked everything to bring help. A murmur ran through the crowd. Mrs. Peterson, the baker's wife, spoke up. It's true. I saw them ride in, covered in mud, barely standing. But they brought Brother Samuel back in time. That horse ain't government property no more than the wind or rain, old Tom Wheeler added. He's a blessing, sent to help good folks in need. Harriman's hand twitched toward his gun. This is sedition. Sergeant, I order you to arrest McGraw and seize the horse. The sergeant looked at his men, then at the faces around them, faces of people who'd welcomed them to Sunday suppers, helped mend their uniforms, treated them like sons. His voice was respectful but firm. Sir, I don't believe that would be wise. These are peaceful citizens expressing their views. We're not here to fight our own neighbors. Cowards. Harriman spat. You'll all regret this. The railroad cannot be denied. Progress doesn't wait for sentiment or superstition. He swung onto his horse, nearly losing his seat in his anger. This isn't over, McGraw. Your precious valley will be railroad property, one way or another, and that wild horse will. Pull cargo cars until he drops. Dust billowed as Harriman wheeled his mount and galloped away. The soldiers nodded apologetically to the crowd before following at a slower pace. The tension broke like a summer storm. People gathered around Liam and Karen, offering handshakes and words of support. Reverend Alden smiled, tucking his Bible away. The Lord works in mysterious ways, he said. Sometimes it takes a wild horse to remind us what freedom truly means. As the crowd dispersed, Liam found himself walking Karen home, their steps matching naturally. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the path, and their hands brushed occasionally, sending quiet sparks through both of them. Thank you, Liam said softly, for speaking up for everything. Karen's smile was gentle. You saved my daughter. How could I not stand with you? They paused outside her cabin, neither wanting to break the moment. Stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, the stallion's whinny carried on the evening breeze. Through the cabin window, they could see Rosa and Tomas at the table. Though still weak, both children were sitting up, sharing soup and bread. Their faces brightened at the sight of Liam and Karen. Mama, Tomas called. Is Mr. McGraw staying for supper? Karen's hand found Liam's, squeezing gently. The touch held. Promise, like spring after a long winter. Though Harriman's threat still hung over the valley. Tonight was for family, for healing, for hope. Looking at Karen in the starlight, Liam felt his heart swell. Whatever battles lay ahead, they would face them together. The stallion had led him here to this moment, to these people who were becoming more precious than his own life. Rosa's laugh drifted through the open window, sweet and clear, the sound of recovery, of joy returning. It mingled with the evening breeze, carrying the scent of sage and promise across the valley. Days passed, and the valley hummed with fresh purpose. Wagons creaked down the dusty road to Liam's homestead, loaded with gifts from neighbors, sweet-smelling. Hay, fresh-cut timber, and warm loaves of bread wrapped in cloth. Inside the church, Reverend Alden's quill scratched steadily as he drafted petitions to the county judge. His determined face, lit by Lamplight. Liam and Karen worked the land together, their movements falling into natural rhythm. He steadied posts while she stretched wire fence, and together they nursed Rosa back to health. One evening, as sunset painted the sky orange, Karen taught Liam to say ahi, thank you, in Apache. His pronunciation was clumsy, but his heart was true. The wild stallion became a fixture, often seen grazing near the homestead. Folks would stop their wagons just to watch him, whispering about miracles. But Harriman's shadow lingered. His riders circled the property at odd hours, spreading whispers of foreclosure and arrest. When gunshots cracked through the night air, spooking the cattle, Liam held Karen close. We'll stand firm, he promised softly. That evening, the family knelt together by the hearth, asking the Creator for strength. Outside, the stallion stood sentinel in the moonlight, his ears pricked toward any threat. Harriman burst into town, clutching official-looking papers, his face twisted with anger. He waved the documents at Liam, demanding immediate eviction. But when they reached the county courthouse, the judge, pressed by hundreds of petition signatures, refused to act hastily. This requires proper review, the judge declared firmly. Harriman's face turned scarlet. I'll handle this my own way then, he snarled, hand hovering near his gun. That evening, Reverend Alden's church bell rang across the valley. Townsfolk filled the wooden pews as Liam stood before them, his voice steady. I was lost in grief, alone with my memories, he said quietly. But God sent that stallion back to show me life still holds purpose. Karen rose next, her children close. I know what it means to lose everything, she shared. But together we can stand against those who would take more. The congregation murmured in agreement, then stood as one. Harriman, watching from the doorway, saw the tide had turned. He mounted his horse and rode away, defeated at last. Under starlight, Liam and Karen walked homeless and Rosa. The wild stallion raced alongside them, his joyful neighing echoing through the peaceful valley. Weeks passed, and spring rains blessed the valley with new life. Wild lupins dotted the meadows, and fresh grass swayed in the gentle breeze. At the white-painted church, neighbors gathered with armfuls of wildflowers, their faces bright with anticipation. Inside, Reverend Alden stood before the altar as Liam waited, his Sunday best brushed clean. Thomas proudly adjusted his new tie, standing tall beside him. Rosa, her cheeks rosy with restored health, scattered yellow and purple petals down the aisle before Karen entered, radiant in her simple white dress. Just as they exchanged their vows, a familiar neigh drew everyone's attention. There on the ridge, the wild stallion stood outlined against the morning sun, his mane catching the light like silver. The congregation gasped in wonder at the sight. That evening, lamplight spilled warmly from their homestead windows. Karen sat together on the porch, her head resting on his shoulder, while the children curled close. In the meadow below, the stallion grazed peacefully, still wild, yet choosing to stay. Thank you, Lord, for second chances, Liam whispered softly. Karen's hand found his, their fingers intertwining as they gazed toward the horizon, hearts full of hope. If today's story reminded you of the quiet strength of love, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow we'll meet right here, where love speaks softly and stays.